The Book of Esther is more than just a biblical narrative. It is a profound story of bravery, divine intervention, and the hidden hand of providence. It takes place during the reign of King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, of Persia, whose empire spanned from India to Ethiopia. This tale is one of survival, cunning, faith, and a woman's extraordinary courage that saved not only her life, but also the lives of her people. A seemingly simple Jewish orphan becomes the unlikely hero in a high-stakes battle between life and death, with everything on the line for the Jewish people of the Persian Empire. This is the story of Esther, a young woman whose destiny seemed uncertain, but whose actions would reverberate through history. In the heart of the Persian Empire, a young queen would rise to become an instrument of God's will, transforming the fate of an entire nation. As we embark on this journey, let us dive deep into this remarkable story of faith and courage. King Xerxes, known for his great wealth, power, and ambition, ruled over an empire so vast it stretched from India to Ethiopia, encompassing 127 provinces. This immense empire was the pride of the Persian world, and Xerxes sought every opportunity to showcase his grandeur. In the third year of his reign, he decided to host an unprecedented 180-day feast for the nobles, princes, military commanders, and officials of his kingdom. The feast was not merely an event, but a display of power, opulence, and the king's ability to control and captivate the elite. For 180 days, the king flaunted the treasures of his vast empire: golden goblets, fine silks, jewels, and the most rare and valuable items from across his territories. The celebrations were meant to demonstrate the wealth and might of his rule, and to solidify his position as a formidable ruler in the eyes of his people and enemies alike. The final leg of this extravagant celebration took place in the capital city of Susa, where Xerxes hosted a 7-day banquet for all citizens, nobles and commoners alike. The palace gardens were adorned with exquisite white and violet linen drapes, hanging from silver rings and marble pillars. Guests reclined on gold and silver couches, set upon mosaic floors made of alabaster, marble, and precious stones. The wine flowed freely, served in goblets of gold, each cup intricately designed and unique in shape. The feast seemed like the pinnacle of the king's reign, but it would soon be marred by an act of defiance from his queen, Vashti. While the king enjoyed his revelry, Queen Vashti hosted a separate banquet for the women of the kingdom. On the 7th day, when Xerxes had likely indulged in wine, he commanded his queen to appear before his guests and show off her beauty. This was no simple request, but a public display meant to showcase her as an ornament in his grand spectacle. However, Queen Vashti refused to comply with the king's command, citing her dignity and the integrity of her position. Her refusal to obey was seen as an affront to Xerxes' authority, a challenge to the very foundations of the patriarchal society he ruled. Furious, Xerxes turned to his advisors for counsel. They feared that Vashti's defiance could set a dangerous precedent, emboldening women throughout the empire to question their husbands and defy their authority. Following their advice, Xerxes made the decision to depose Queen Vashti. She was removed from her position, and a royal decree was issued across the empire stating that women must honor their husbands and respect their authority. A search would be conducted to find a new queen, setting the stage for a remarkable turn of events. Among the many women who were brought into the king's palace for the selection of a new queen was a young Jewish woman named Hadassah, known to us by her Persian name, Esther. Esther was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, a man of integrity and wisdom, who had been deeply involved in the Jewish community and remained faithful to the God of Israel. Mordecai had raised Esther with great care, teaching her to trust in God and to value wisdom and humility above all else. When Esther was chosen to enter the royal palace, Mordecai warned her to conceal her Jewish identity, knowing that revealing her heritage might endanger her position. Esther obeyed her cousin's advice, demonstrating a profound sense of trust and respect for his guidance. Once in the palace, Esther quickly caught the attention of Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the women's quarters. Hegai, impressed by Esther's beauty, grace, and poise, provided her with special beauty treatments, lavish food, and preferential treatment. Over the course of a year, Esther underwent intense preparation, receiving the finest cosmetics and training to make her the most suitable candidate for the role of queen. When the day finally came for Esther to stand before King Xerxes, her beauty and wisdom stood out among all the women. She was not only physically captivating, but also displayed a quiet strength and dignity that resonated with the king. After much consideration, Xerxes chose Esther as his new queen, crowning her in a lavish ceremony that marked the beginning of her reign. Meanwhile, Mordecai continued to watch over Esther from outside the palace gates. He remained vigilant, ever protective of his cousin, and stayed informed of events within the royal court. During this time, Mordecai overheard a plot to assassinate King Xerxes, a conspiracy orchestrated by two of the king's trusted officials, Bigthana and Teresh. Mordecai, loyal to the king and his people, immediately relayed the information to Esther, who passed it on to Xerxes. The plot was thwarted, and the conspirators were executed. This act of loyalty would later prove to be pivotal in the story, as it set in motion the events that would ultimately lead to Mordecai's rise in the Persian court. Haman, a high-ranking official in Xerxes' court, was promoted to a position of great power and influence. As the king's right-hand man, Haman was given the honor of having everyone bow before him. His position filled him with pride and arrogance, and he expected total obedience from all those under his authority. However, there was one man who refused to bow: Mordecai, Esther's cousin. Mordecai's refusal to bow before Haman was not an act of defiance against the king, but a statement of his allegiance to God. As a devout Jew, Mordecai would not bow before anyone except the Lord. Haman, humiliated by Mordecai's refusal, was consumed with rage. His anger was not limited to Mordecai alone. It extended to all Jews. He decided that the entire Jewish population of the Persian Empire should be exterminated. Haman schemed and manipulated Xerxes into issuing a decree for the destruction of the Jews. He offered a vast sum of money to the king, promising that the execution of the plan would not only eliminate an unwanted population, but also bring great wealth to the royal coffers. Xerxes, unaware of Esther's Jewish heritage, gave his approval to the decree, which was sent out across the empire. The news struck terror into the hearts of the Jewish people. Mordecai, in deep mourning, tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and began wailing loudly in the streets. The entire city of Susa was in turmoil as the Jewish people faced the prospect of total annihilation. As news of the decree spread, Mordecai sought Esther's help. He sent her a message urging her to speak to the king on behalf of the Jewish people. But approaching the king without being summoned was a dangerous act, one that could result in death if the king did not extend his golden scepter to grant favor. Mordecai's words to Esther were both an encouragement and a challenge. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? This call to action resonated deeply with Esther. She knew the risk, but she also understood the weight of her position and the responsibility she had to her people. In a moment of profound courage, Esther made the decision to approach the king. She asked Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast and pray for 3 days, seeking God's intervention and guidance. On the third day of fasting, Esther donned her royal robes and entered the king's inner court, standing before him. When Xerxes saw her, he extended the golden scepter, signaling that she had found favor in his eyes. He asked her what she desired, offering her anything up to half the kingdom. Instead of immediately revealing her request, Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet. This was a strategic move. She chose to delay her request, allowing time for events to unfold in her favor. At the banquet, Esther still did not reveal her true intentions. She invited the king and Haman to another banquet the following day. Her patience and wisdom in these moments were critical in setting the stage for her eventual victory. That night, King Xerxes was unable to sleep. To pass the time, he ordered the royal chronicles to be read to him. As the scrolls were opened, the king was reminded of the time Mordecai had uncovered the assassination plot against him. The king realized that Mordecai had never been rewarded for his loyalty. In the morning, Xerxes asked Haman how he should honor someone the king delights in. Haman, thinking the king was referring to him, suggested an extravagant public display, including royal robes, a horse, and a parade through the city streets. To Haman's shock and humiliation, Xerxes ordered him to do all of this for Mordecai, the man he despised. Haman was forced to publicly honor the very man he had plotted to kill, a turn of events that would set the stage for his eventual downfall. At the second banquet, Esther finally revealed her Jewish identity to King Xerxes and exposed Haman's plot to annihilate her people. In a fit of rage, Xerxes stormed out of the banquet hall. In a desperate attempt to save himself, Haman fell on Esther's couch, pleading for mercy. But when Xerxes returned and misinterpreted the scene, he believed Haman was attempting to assault the queen. In a swift act of justice, Xerxes ordered Haman to be executed on the very gallows that Haman had built to hang Mordecai. With Haman gone, Esther and Mordecai worked to undo the damage. While the original decree could not be revoked, they issued a new edict allowing the Jews to defend themselves. When the appointed day arrived, the Jews triumphed over their enemies. The victory was celebrated with great joy, and the Feast of Purim was established as an annual celebration of God's deliverance. Mordecai was elevated to a position of great prominence, and Esther continued to use her influence to protect and defend the Jewish people, ensuring that their lives and legacy would be preserved. The story of Esther is one of extraordinary faith and courage. It reminds us that even when the odds seem insurmountable, God is always at work behind the scenes, using people and circumstances to fulfill his divine plan. Esther's bravery, Mordecai's wisdom, and the divine intervention that shaped their actions demonstrate that we all have a role to play, and sometimes we are placed in positions for such a time as this.